in case that he doesn't have time to fully present it in person because our questions run over. Just a thought.
Yeah.
And I also think when we start the work group report outs, we just need to make sure that we are clear with what we are expecting from the consortium at that point in time, knowing that each group is in a slightly different place. So.
Right. So you want us to preface it with that, or so will we be able to get something in advance to the consortium members for them to review?
That's my goal.
Okay. So our goal would be to make sure that everybody has that, like a week in advance? I know that's 2 weeks from yesterday, but is that seeming feasible?
Week in advance, or at least the Monday before.
Right.
But hopefully my group
I think,
will be good.
I think a week in advance is a good goal. That way, we have that couple of business days to work with if we need a little extra time. But I think it's the best to shoot for that.
Agree.
Give everybody that weekend and few business days to take a look so that they can come, prepared to ask questions, which is going to be really key. And hopefully, of course, the hope is that folks will feel ready and able to respond in an open meeting without us doing anything, more complicated like breakout groups and things like that to do questions. Unless anyone thinks, is there anyone who thinks that we need to do something like that to be more productive in getting feedback on the recommendations, or it's just a straight presentation and Q&A going to be adequate? Anyone have any feelings about that?
I don't know if, so either whether we use that time or a different time, I do think that there needs to be time where there's dialogue, that people are really going to want dialogue. And I don't know if you remember back when we were able to meet in person, and I think it was one of our last meetings, and we were at the name is escaping me, but the building where Kumba is housed, and there was a man in the back, and actually I know his wife, and he was trying to ask different questions. And so I know that just from their backstory and some of their, his wife is pretty influential in the disabilities community, that they were trying to be able to engage more. And so knowing what type of advocates they are, I believe that there's probably more people that are going to want some type of dialogue to engage in, whether it's that at that moment or at some other time. So if this isn't the appropriate time, then maybe another one. And this was Tika, sorry.
Right. No, I think that's really good feedback. So really more sort of the non-consortium member opportunity to engage with the recommendations, right?
Correct. So I guess I was thinking,
Tika? So like the way that people who aren't members of the consortium can engage with this thing. And I know you're at work.
Yes. So whether it was in a breakout room or if it was a separate listening dialogue session, conversation or something, but there definitely, I think, needs to be opportunities for the community to engage in the dialogue. If we're going to want them to be bought in, I think we need to hear what their thoughts are.
Yeah, I agree. Any thought? I know we've talked earlier in earlier meetings about sort of town hall type listening sessions to gather public feedback that we might not get in the context of just like the regular meeting. And I'm certainly very open to scheduling a subsequent listening session that can be totally dedicated to hearing from community members and advocates. Once we've kind of, I think I see, this is our meeting to explain and present and describe what we're going for, which I think will take up a lot of the time, and obviously they'll get a sense of where the consortium members are coming from. I think it would be very appropriate to have a subsequent meeting just focused on hearing from members of the community on what they think about what they heard in that meeting. Does that speak to what you're asking for?
Sorry, struggling to unmute.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, I think a town hall would be appropriate.
Okay. Maybe we can put that as a follow-up and something that it would be good, I think, to be able to have that scheduled and be able to announce that, I think, at that meeting, and maybe look at something the following week. I'm just gonna put that out there. I'd be very happy to do that.
I think that would be good, and I think if we also look to engage different community groups too, kind of ahead of it, and having maybe a sense of some questions they would like to hear. So, for instance, like GACEC or you know, some other groups like that, but having it ahead of time to be able to have the discussion progress better.
Okay.
And who plans town halls? Like, how does that happen?
I mean, I think basically we would have to set up another Zoom where the agenda would essentially be public comment.
Okay.
I think we would have to do that. I mean, to me, that's the simplest, most direct way for us to do that. And I mean, I'm happy to host, to be the person, and I guess we can figure out who else might need to be on such a call, so that we can record it. But I think it would be different, obviously, than what we've done a bit in the past, where it was sort of that very formal public comment taking. This would obviously be more of a listening session.
Mm-hmm. No, that sounds good.
Yeah, and I think if you have work group or at least chairs of the work group, if at all possible there,
Mm-hmm.
that would be helpful
Yeah.
too.
And I feel like we want to make sure we give enough time to like let people know it's happening too.
Yeah, for sure.
So maybe like one of the first weeks in November might be easier, like logistically, you know?
Okay.
Just thinking, because you want people to know about it, but you know.
In addition to people knowing, I think we should be clear about what our process is for asking questions and giving feedback, and that you know, if questions are excuse me, submitted ahead of time or not addressed, we would do our best to address them in some form or possible written form afterwards or something to that effect.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that's good. And I guess, and I can see, you know, if we have a week in between this meeting and doing something like this, you know, I think we'd have to make sure it would give us an opportunity, I think, to do outreach with some of those groups that we can identify. And also, you know, to give folks an opportunity to rewatch the meeting if they couldn't watch it for whatever reason, and to digest, you know, any materials that talk about the recommendations.
Ray also put something in the chat. She said another consideration is to trim the time allocated to expand the public question listening time for the meeting on the 22nd. For example, she doesn't know that social determinants needs a 15-minute presentation, and roll call can be done in the chat to save time. Yeah.
I've seen that done. Has that been pretty effective? Roll call in the chat.
That would be nice. It's so awkward calling everyone's names. But
okay.
Either way.
We can definitely try that.
Good morning, everyone.
Good
morning. Matt got a a legal guidance that said that roll call can be done in the chat because we're saving the recording and there's documentation.
Okay.
Cool.
So you don't have people fumbling or you're calling people when they haven't gotten on yet and all that kind of stuff.
Or dealing with muting and.
Right. And Jason, do you think that the social determinants needs 15 minutes for a presentation?
I'm not sure we have 15 minutes worth of stuff just yet. So no, I agree with you. I'm not sure we'll use that full 15 minutes.
And does the Office of Innovation, 15 minutes is a long time. Does the Office of Innovation and Equity really need 15 minutes?
True.
Well, I mean, that one probably includes time for questioning. I know I forget how much we allocated to them at the last meeting, but when, you know, leaving room for people to question them, we started to kind of push the limits of the time we had allocated for them. I don't know to what extent that will have changed. I think people still might, I don't know, might want to ask some things about, you know, CARES Act or reopening and things like that, which I'd like to make room for, but maybe that is not, maybe that breaks up too much what we're doing with our other presentations.
And they're
And
not
so-
making it, they're not making the reopening decisions. The districts are.
No. Yes, that's true. I mean, they're probably, and they're not necessarily connected to the recommendations from the state either, although as a state entity or part of the department, they could potentially speak to that if we ask them to, or at least take back the questions. But again, maybe that is too much of a departure from the rest of the agenda.
I just,
Makes sense.
you know, maybe you just ask Jim how, you know, does he have an update? I mean, a lot of the questions the last meeting that I recall, they presented. I'm not talking about the woman that presented, but you know, what are their priorities for their department, for their office, and other things that they had not really nailed down. If he doesn't have answers, he may not want to open up a can of worms.
Okay, that's fair. All right, so maybe Haley, when you touch base with Jim about updates, maybe we can just feel out whether or not they feel prepared to do that this particular month.
Mhm.
Did the state board act on the athletics issue?
They did.
Kelly saying yes. And was a different decision made, or are they moving forward?
They are starting sports.
Yeah,
That's
they're moving forward.
That's an equity issue. Our kids
Sure
don't have
is.
transportation to participate in that.
Yep.
Not,
Nope.
I mean, not large scale.
Mhm.
Yeah, with sports and reopening, there's definitely some things for us to be attentive to in terms of, you know, accountability around state recommendations and how districts are implementing. I think absolutely. But I mean, again, that could take an entire meeting if we wanted to dedicate ourselves to it.
Yeah, I know, but in our meeting with the Wilmington Center, that was his update, and it does take time. So I'm just suggesting that you get a feel for what the content of the update might be.
Okay. I think that's great feedback. Okay, so we'll kind of put an asterisk by that update and start a dialogue with Jim Simmons about, you know, what he might be prepared to bring and whether or not, you know, maybe it's too much for that window, and trim the social determinants. You know, we'll talk to you guys about how much time you think is appropriate.
I think
Maybe
10 is sufficient.
10, and then maybe leave 10 for questions.
I mean, you can. I don't know. What do you think, Jason?
10 for us with questions. I think that we could probably swing that.
Well, she
okay,
said
so you're thinking.
if we have 10 for a presentation, how many minutes do you think should be left for questions?
Oh,
5?
I think 5 would be fine. I wouldn't go any less than that because I think people will have questions about what we've been up to. So I think 5 should be about right.
Okay. Okay.
And just something to think of if we do a listening session, just when the next work groups are meeting, because I know the educator work group is meeting, I think the second week of November, to hopefully finalize as much as possible for the December meeting.
Yeah.
So just
One thing I might change in this agenda also, and I don't know, feel free to push back, is with the review of the high-level goals and the redistricting timeline piece, which, you know, has a legislative aspect to it. I don't know if it's better to start with that or end with that. I'm just trying to think in terms of, you know, each group is going to have some specific actionable recommendations in, you know, at least one case we know there's a legislative piece, and I want to be able to like wrap up very clearly sort of with bullets of what these actionable things are after we've gone through everything, and kind of just sort of leave everybody with that. So either we need to kind of swing back and make sure everybody knows what the action items are after we've gone through all of the different groups talking about their individual sets of them. I don't know if that's just, you know, we have a slide in the presentation that kind of brings it all back, or if we bring the high level goals to kind of restate everything, touch on everything after each group has had the opportunity to give a little bit of a deeper sense of what they've been working on. I don't know if that makes sense, if I'm being very clear or not, but I just want to make sure that we kind of end on a note of here's all the things that we are right now proposing we're going to be advancing, and sort of leave people with that.
I think that makes sense. Just like a recap slide of like,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe even swapping the high level with the update from Office of Equity and Innovation, knowing that maybe we end up losing that anyway. And so we sort of end with like the wrap up from Matt and I, revisiting all the things, and then bringing in, you know, the item about recalibrating the timeline through legislation, which I think is going to be something that Matt and I will speak to. It's not going to be any of the individual work groups. So it'll give us the opportunity to talk about that, and restate sort of the deliverables that have come out of all the prior presentations.
So you think move Jim's
If we
update-
keep it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so actually, because the way it was striking me when we were reading through it before was like, okay, so then we bring Jim on if we have time for it, and it kind of takes a different tangent, and then we kind of lose the thread of the thought of what we've been talking about. And what I really want people to leave the meeting with is understanding what we're recommending, what our deliverables are, so to speak, and have that be the takeaway. So I don't know that it would be wise for us to leave with sort of a broader reaching conversation from that office that isn't necessarily relevant to our action steps that we're pursuing and reviewing.
So do you want to give, do you want to change the sequence of the update from the Office of Equity and Innovation?
Yeah, I was thinking put that up front if we keep it. And then, you know, give us a little time with that if we need it. And then bring the review of the high level goals and sort of recap the recommendations at the end. And Matt and I can do that, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Could we do, I guess, in line with what Sister Ray mentioned about the 10 minutes and maybe the 5, so instead of 15, that he has in his 10 and 5 minutes for questions?
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
sure.
Yeah.
I think it's still on the screen, Tika.
And people can put their questions in the chat.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, consortium members and members of the public. I know that
Yeah,
can get a little.
Well, but it's, if you're going to invite questions from the public and you're not at your public comment period, it's better to put them in the chat, because you're able to be more efficient.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, once Jim finishes his presentation, we can just go through the questions that have been posted in the chat.
Mm-hmm.
Sounds good to me.
Hi, I have a question. This is Dawn Alexander. I have a couple of questions about what was just discussed. So is the consortium taking a stand or addressing the equity issue with the DIA's decision to begin sports again? Is that something what are the thoughts
I mean,
on
I think
that?
the only way that we can know that is if it comes up in open discussion, if it's brought forth as part of that conversation with, you know, our representatives from the department. You know, the consortium members would have to elevate that, I think. I mean, if we feel that it's part of the discussion that we want to ask Jim to speak to, in order to drive that, we can do that. But I don't think we can, I mean, I don't know if we could, I hesitate to speak for the whole consortium and say that we're going to take a stand on it. But it certainly could be something that we ask him to speak about from an equity perspective.
Okay, so when he gave the update, the state board hadn't acted. Now that the state board has acted, now that places him in a different kind of position, that his board didn't stop it.
Right.
Mm-hmm. They affirmed it.
They affirmed it, and we can't. I mean, it's in the public domain, so why we can't be blind to it.
No, I mean, and I think if it's an equity issue, you know, as members of this consortium and of course public members as well, it can be raised in our meeting, and the ask be made that action be taken.
Yes. It is an equity issue. We are, so many students are not able to participate because they don't have transportation. This is a problem.
Yeah.
And it's a safety issue. I mean, NFL teams what's the one team has like 5 or 7 members. I don't even watch football. I know that.
And I'm not disputing that at all.
I know you're not. You're trying. I don't think you're disputing it.
It's a planning meeting, so we can't make that decision for the consortium. Is all I'm really saying.
Okay.
So.
Okay. So, but we understand you can't make the decision. So I guess if the consortium wants to go in a direction to at least go on record, then you're open to the conversation at the consortium meeting. Is that what you're saying?
I think we are always open to consortium members of the public asking us to consider any equity issue. Absolutely. I don't put any walls around that. Just that in the context of this planning meeting, of course, we can't make that decision or necessarily have that discussion. But if we think it's appropriate to ask, Mr. Simmons should be prepared to speak to it, because as consortium members or public members, we are, you know, receiving that request that he be prepared to do that. Absolutely, we can do that.
Great. And I have another area. Oh, go ahead, Ray.
It was sorry, Dawn. It was me. I just wanted
Tika? Okay, I'm sorry,
clarification for a second. Is it equity among sports or equity among populations?
Well, it's equity. I think there are a lot of things. I'm looking at equity to access to be able to participate, because a lot of the high schools that have chosen to resume sports are not providing activity buses. So if students are not in school, if their high school is not meeting at the school, the athletes have to get themselves to school for practice and then get themselves home. And we know that a lot of students don't have access to a vehicle, and it may not be safe to ride in a vehicle with someone else, and not all of our schools are on the bus route. So how are athletes to get, there's not equal access in the ability to participate. I mean, the health issue is a whole nother issue. I'm concerned that there are students who may want to participate because their high school is offering the opportunity, but they can't get there. That is an equity issue.
Thank you for clarifying. I think that those are all valid points. I've heard some people discuss it as an equity issue, saying, well, my sport isn't getting enough time, or my sport isn't brought back. And so thank you for that clarification. And I agree.
I mean, that could be another issue
point.
too, when we look at students who are seeking the opportunity to go to college because of a scholarship. That's a whole nother aspect. Transportation is always a challenge, and
yes, it is.
So
Yeah, I would just
My
say, you know, I don't
recommendation-
know if you want to, yeah,
my recommendation
if you want to raise that in
was,
writing, that's
if
fine.
you're going to bring back sports, then you need to ensure that activity buses will be available to pick up students within a certain distance from their home, and the availability to get them home. And it's a separate issue of,
And
again,
again,
health
no,
is
I
a separate
hear
issue.
that.
Tizzy or Senator Lockman,
Yeah,
I mean, as you can tell, this is a loaded issue. So if he wants to give an update on it, that's, I don't know what the path forward is going to be. If there's a one pager that speaks to the pros and the cons that can be sent out in advance of the meeting, that would probably be helpful.
so I think we'll just include that in ask for Jim Simmons to consider that we're hearing from consortium members is something that they would like to hear addressed, so that we can consider it for.
And maybe if he also coupled that with, I know the night of the school board
I think we'll
decision,
just-
there was a variety of questions that they were addressing too. So if there's, if it's saved somewhere, like a frequently asked questions or a response to public comment questions, that might be helpful too.
Just to share out. Okay. All right. Haley, you got that?
They spent about 2 or 3 hours
A long
really
time. I
discussing
know.
and going
I
back.
know. I was trying to watch it. It was so long.
Right. He may not want to raise it at all, but somebody in the public
That's
may.
also true.
Well, Haley, we'll have Haley touch base with him in preparation for the meeting, so we'll know by next week,
Okay,
you know,
all right.
kind of where we are in terms of having that a topic of discussion.
Okay.
Okay.
I think there's
let's,
one other
move
issue.
on. Do we have any significant work group? Oh, agenda issue?
So I have another question. So SCR 65, which passed over a year ago to look at DHSS and the restructuring of DHSS, because so much of what we do in education is impacted by our students' availability to access Medicaid, our families' opportunity to access Medicaid, access to wellness centers, mental health supports, all kinds of services that we are working towards making sure our students and families they're knowledgeable about these services, they have access to these services. The work of that team, I'm also on that team, and we're working on the recommendations for legislation and or policy and practices. So I think it's important that we somehow bring the two work groups together, because of course not everything in DHSS is impacting educational equity, but a lot of it is, because we're looking at access to the kinds of wraparound services that students and families need,
Sure.
and they're not able to access now. So
So do we
somehow
think-
to be able to bring those recommendations together and see where there may be overlap or abilities to consolidate recommendations, that would be helpful.
Does that feel to those of you who are part of social determinants, maybe like something that's part of the social determinants group
Maybe we do that.
purview, or because that way
What
we
do you
can work
think,
it
Ray?
through the
Kika?
work group.
Sorry, I'm slow with the unmute on my phone. I think it would be great to talk about it in the social deterrence committee, and then maybe cycling it back after we kind of streamline some recommendations to the full consortium.
Yeah, I think that's definitely, I think, the more effective way for us to do it, because that way we can have a group that's focused on that, has expertise on that, to kind of digest it and then bring it back to the full consortium. I think is, I think that would be the most effective way too.
Tizzy, can you say that again? For me, it was really choppy. I don't know if that's how it was for everyone else, but
Cool.
can you just repeat that?
Okay.
Sorry.
All right. Anything else on the
No, we didn't hear, you
Oh,
were,
sorry. No, it's good to be able to breaking up.
yeah,
Can you hear me now? Okay.
better.
Yeah, I can hear
Okay.
you now.
I was just, okay, good. Sorry about that. I was just saying, I think it is good for those types of policy considerations or sort of interactions. I
You're
think
out
it's
again.
stronger or more effective for us to have that kind of digested through the appropriate work group. Right?
Yeah, we got the general gist of it.
What?
Did you want to start that digesting
All right, sorry.
in the work group?
Yes,
Yeah, that's the general gist of it, right?
yes, it is.
But just in anticipation of the output from the work groups, I can see that there's going to be some overlap that needs to be discussed between the educator, the potential for overlap between the educator work group and one of the smaller groups in the social determinants around culturally competent. I mean, around cultural competence, training, and around curriculum. Now I know the educator work group has not discussed curriculum because I'm on there. I'm on that work group.
Right. Yeah.
But the curricular content, and also with the African American Task Force, is that one of the agenda items that you all have, Anamdi? Is the more inclusiveness and content in curriculum?
It is, that's a part of Sherry Dorsey Walker's group. She's touching on education, but I believe it is.
So at some point in time, in the planning, we should figure out how to bring the tentacles together.
Yeah, and I watched their meeting last night, and so far they've been very focused on sort of the economic opportunity side. So I think we could reach out to her and find out where that falls on their agenda. But so far their discussions have been more focused on more on financial aspects. Of the disparities. Okay, good. But no, I think that's good to be thinking about. How can we bring the work groups together with each other and with other sources of research and proposals that are out there, especially as we move. I think right now, can you guys hear me okay still?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. I think, obviously right now we're focused on our short term. Let's get these recommendations solidified for December for action after that. And then I think when we get to the new year, we'll obviously be in a place to also be now charting our next policy steps. So, revisiting our little policy wheel and who are the stakeholders we need to be interfacing with, what information should we be pulling in to plot our next moves. So I think it's good to think ahead to that, but also we want to make sure that we really follow through on our December finalization and getting that stuff done in the short term, in my view. Sorry, I'm trying to get to this bureau. All right, so we're ready to move to the work group updates?
Sure.
Haters, we're meeting on Tuesday at 4:30.
Okay.
There you go.
That's it. Very good. Quick and easy. Sorry, I lost my audio. All right.
I'll let Namdi or Eugene speak to funding if they feel like it.
Yeah, I think we just had a good meeting. Geez, what day was that? Wednesday, Tuesday, Haley, something like that. We had something like that. We had a small team meeting. We're just preparing for our next upcoming meeting, which is going to be on you have the day, Haley.
The 8th.
The 8th. I was about to say the 10th. It's on the 8th. We're working on bringing Representative Jakes to talk about the referendum reform. Talking about
I wasn't
we're
planning
working
to. I
through
think that
next
was
steps into how we can get the ball rolling. and get this kind of legislation kind of locked in from a sense. So bringing in different stakeholders, hopefully, knocking on wood, able to bring Representative Jakes, and already Senator Sturgeon is on, who is the Senate Prime of HB 129, which was Representative Jakes' previous bill about referendum reform. She's actually been attending our meetings anyway. So maybe she can even provide some insight as well as a co-sponsor on the Senate side of the bill. So that's kind of where we are. Representative Chicocha, if I'm missing anything, please feel free to add on.
Now that's it, and had a great conversation with Rep. Jake. So he is confirmed again,
Awesome.
But he has promised me he would be there, and he looks forward to really speaking about it. We had a great conversation. He gave me a lot of insight that he intends to share. I mean, historically about challenges that have been faced and even path forward. He gave a lot of suggestions about ways in which we can build support that hasn't been done before, working with the boards, getting resolutions from them, getting support from the various senators and representatives for their districts, speaking to the schools to reach them, and reaching out to the News Journal, this strategy that he said that he believes that could be effective. So I'm sure to be part of his presentation, but he is really amped up about us taking this forward and hope that we can really build the muster the support that we need to get it have a very successful piece of legislation.
That's awesome.
Hi, this is Tika again. To the referendum reform and ways to get galvanized support for that, is it possible for us to offer some type of listening session or something with partnering with someone like maybe Network Delaware or something else? But I mentioned this a couple times previously, that people don't feel comfortable when you take their voice away. And I know that even myself, as someone with a political science degree, I can understand that that is not necessarily the best place to exercise your voice in the effective way. But the perception of people is that they do exercise their voice that way, because even going and voting in school board elections where we have low voter turnout, people look at that as I'm selecting someone else who is going to maybe speak for me. And like I said, right now, there's a lot of different views on government, and the fact that people actually go to vote for that referendum, their yes or no, they feel like that is really their voice. And so ripping that away from people without putting something in place, without just saying, hey, you can vote in your school board elections, I don't think is going to benefit us. And I don't think it's going to get us any further than our previous groups. So possibly
again,
we could do
I mean,
something to help them exercise it.
I would say thank you for that, Tika. And I'm open to it. If you want, like, I'm certainly open to the conversation. I'm sure everyone else is as well. So maybe a way so we can put together that kind of discussion, so we get that kind of insight from community members. I wouldn't have a problem with it, but I also want to hear what, thoughts from obviously Representative Chicocha as the partner in this.
I also think it's a mindset shift. So it wouldn't just be this, one session offered and people are like, oh yeah, we're on board now. I think it's going to be a continuous of the group putting that message out there about how to activate their voice in effect. Exactly.
Yeah, no, I agree. And remember, of course, we hopefully can engage the public in the conversations that the work group is having, and then also any listening sessions that we do are going to be focused on getting people to talk about specific recommendations. And I think that'll be obviously a big one that draws feedback.
And I would agree 100%. Again, that was a part of what Representative Jakes mentioned of the hurdles that he felt in the previous versions of this bill, that the challenges. Where was that engagement with the stakeholders? One thing he mentioned in particular was about how do we outreach to our seniors and reaching our senior population. A lot of them, they've automatically vote against this. They don't feel that the schools, they have a vested interest like that in the schools, so they vote against this. So he said, how do we change that narrative? And that's where he mentioned trying to get partnerships, building capacity in support for within the General Assembly, but also working with our districts, having a campaign he mentioned as far as letters to the editor about why the change is necessary in terms of equity. And so it's definitely not just a meeting. I think it's going to be an ongoing, a consistent effort that we need to try to change this mindset about what we're really changing as far as referendum reform. And our goal is really, I believe, is tying it to equity, to realize this is an equity issue where certain schools, they're not passing referendums, and ultimately it impacts the needs and the resources that are available for our children.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this is great that the group is thinking this stuff through. And I think all of our work groups, it would be amazing if all are thinking on this level in terms of, obviously recommendations, bringing that, into a full form, but then also thinking through, the public education, the outreach, and the political strategy, frankly, that it'll take if we really want to deliver on the deliverables. So I'm glad to hear that you guys are working on that too. And I hope we can get all groups there.
And Laura's group that she's formulated might be a good place to start with that too, because that's a group that has really seemed to be pushing for this, but they're also ones that give the response where you can exercise your voice by going and voting for school boards. And again, that's not really the response that people want. So maybe if they understood it more and also had good messaging around it and were open to have that dialogue, that would be a great set of stakeholders that are already out there pushing.
I agree. Cool. Okay, anything on social determinants? We see you have a meeting coming up.
Well, we just had a meeting, and each of the leaders of the small groups, holistic child development, wraparound services and partnerships, and what's the title of the other one? Racial justice and education, or something like that. They presented their first summary of the why, the focus areas for further investigation. Dawn, she can speak to hers, has since she happens to be on these calls. She gave a much more extensive references and research information to support the areas that were called out as needing, where there are gaps or opportunities for systemic change. And so the next steps are for the smaller groups to dig deeper into what has been posited, to tease out priorities, and to begin to take a look at what are some, assuming that based on forecasts around financing or the state's financial position, what a ramp up plan might look like, and what would be the prioritization of populations, or defining, how to target groups most in need in alignment with a phased-in strategy. Is it Jason and Dawn? I'm just trying to hit the high notes.
I think that you did. Yeah, you summarized it well. Yes, thank you, Ray.
Did you all see those? Did this planning group see those one pagers?
Yeah.
Okay.
I really liked the format of that. I thought that was really effective when I was watching the meeting.
Yeah, that's Matt. He has
I
another.
think he said it was you.
No, it wasn't. It was. I give feedback, but he has another. He has another. he's going to make another distillation. He wants a distillation of the information so that when it starts getting discussed more broadly, that people will read it.
Yeah.
So
is
the most broad brush strokes are in the systemic racism or the racial justice and education group. So we have to drill down on that more. Yasser is the co-lead, and he has publication deadlines right now.
Yeah, he's been very busy. Do you expect to have any clear, policy or resource recommendation, direction in the October meeting? I know you're not meeting until after that again. So
No.
Do you expect to give more of a high level overview of where you've been, or? Okay.
I mean, Dawn, do you have any?
Sure.
Dawn might be able to call out some policy areas.
Yes. So thank you so much for asking. So on the 21st, and this is it's not official. I can't wait for it to be official. But the governor's announcement is going to be made that on the 21st of October, the governor will be putting forth the 5 programming services. The strategic plan will be released on October 21st, and it's the 2020 through 2025. And that is the extensive work from the statewide needs assessment. And so on October 21st, that will be official and it'll be released. I have a copy of the draft, but I know there are some changes that are going to be made. But yes, there are specific legislative recommendations. One is one I've been working with Senator Sturgeon on, which is to move Part C, which is birth to 3, special education, early intervention, out of DHSS and into DOE. There's some other recommendations. The Child Care Development Fund block grant. It's one of the largest federal funding sources that we receive in Delaware. It's about $22 million a year, I believe, at this point. That is what funds purchase of care, TANF. So when we look at the CCDFBG, most states have moved that block grant out of DHSS and into DOE for lots of reasons I could talk about all day, but I'll try to be brief. So that's a recommendation, is moving the oversight of that federal grant into DOE, really a governance consolidation. So looking at accountability in early childhood programs and services, because having all the work under 3 departments they're data, et cetera. So moving Part C, moving the block grant, and then also some recommendations of broadening access to services. So a lot of the services that we have in Delaware, like looking at WIC, how WIC is implemented, how we educate families about WIC, looking at developmental screening, there will absolutely be recommendations for either regulations and or legislation related to developmental screening. And then there'll be additional legislative recommendations around kindergarten registration to make the single registration requirements, so to ease the burden on families. But I'll have that whole document to share ASAP, and I would encourage everyone to attend on the 21st once I have all the details.
Okay, great. That's really helpful.
We may need to recapture our 15 minutes.
I was gonna say, sounds like there's a lot to talk about actually. But so you do feel on track for a solid, December recommendations for us to act on. So we're still on track for that.
At least for early childhood.
Okay.
For a whole.
That's a lot. So
yeah, it is, and it's very important. And the early childhood community has been working for several years. And so, but it's going to, it impacts the whole trajectory. So, and so we're really, congratulations that this ball is getting moved down the field.
Right. Of course, we want to be part of that. I mean, we don't need to reinvent every wheel. We just need to identify maybe some of the wheels that have stopped turning and get them moving where it matters for equity. So I really like that. Okay.
I think
Sounds good.
one more thing, so that it's adopting recommendations. So when other work groups, when other advocates are making solid recommendations, it's supporting them. We don't need to recreate.
Exactly. We need to just help sort of galvanize political will to get it done. If that's something we've decided is necessary for equity as a consortium, obviously. I think that's the way that we can be very useful. So I like that we're pulling in more from some of these outside sources as well. I think that's exactly what we should be doing. All right. Anything else on work group updates before we touch on public engagement? Okay. Questions and public inquiries that we can't answer in the meeting. I know, Haley, you were pursuing answers to those from our prior meeting. How does that? It looked like responses were flowing pretty well.
Wait, for what? Sorry, can you say that again? Tizzy.
Oh, sorry, I forgot to unmute myself. I was talking. Now, synthesizing the responses that we're getting, that we're asking either from the department or other sources to help us answer questions we haven't been able to answer, maybe from public comment, things like that. Have most of those questions that we pulled together been responded to?
Yeah, most of them. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So how are we doing on sort of synthesizing it in a way that we can put out there?
It's going. I'm trying to figure out the best way to like capture all the questions and then make a public facing version that has the questions that have been answered, you know? So
yeah. Okay. Maybe that's something we could look at next week. Is that realistic?
Probably, yeah.
Okay. I mean, feel free, you can say no. I would put an unrealistic thing on there, but it'd be great to look at a draft of what that response document might look like. And then we, of course, then it gives us a model to work with for moving forward. And I guess my other question is, are we doing this for our work group meetings as well? Are we kind of letting our work groups handle this? I mean, work group leaders, feel free to say, I mean, if you feel that you're able to answer those questions within the meetings, or, you know, meeting time between meetings isn't as long, so maybe it's not as much of an issue, but whether or not that's a model that the work groups feel the need to pull, or do work groups not feel like the same need to have a framework for that?
I think a framework would be helpful. We haven't had questions thus far that couldn't be responded to. But I think having a framework would be helpful.
Okay. I think we're working towards that.
Once you start prioritizing and having to make choices, that's when it gets more difficult.
Okay. Yeah, definitely. Okay, cool. Any other thoughts on that? All right, good. The other thing I wanted to bring up, I don't know if it came up again last week or not, is just, I know we had talked about the way that we transmit our meetings and make sure that folks have as much access to either watch it live or to watch it after the fact. And I know we talked about looking into YouTube as an alternative to Facebook Live, either as the broadcast place or the place where we kind of store things afterwards. Have we been able to look any further into broadcasting and saving onto YouTube, and if that's an option.
Yeah, it's definitely an option. I asked Sarah Pragg at UD, and she just said that we should just make a Reading YouTube page channel. Yeah.
Cool.
So we can do that.
Okay.
Yeah. I think
Okay,
it
that's good.
becomes-
I wasn't sure if it was like extra cost or anything.
No, I don't think so. I think it just becomes another thing to manage, which I might not be able to be the person that does the YouTube page. So if anyone is interested in being the leader on that,
So what,
I'm
and
not
when you
sure.
say manage, do you mean like comments and things like that?
Well, I guess, no, I mean, I guess once we get it set up, it'd be fine because,
It sort of auto-populates, I think.
yeah,
I
it
don't know.
should. I don't really know either. I haven't done it, but I guess it's more, I guess I would be doing it for the funding work group and the full consortium meeting, and then like the other work groups would be responsible for, live streaming to the YouTube channel for those work group meetings. So like Jason and Kelly.
Okay, so we need to sort of make sure everybody could kind of plug into it and broadcast to it, and then it's some of the stuff works. It looks really smooth, the way it kind of broadcasts, and then it's just kept there for people to see later. But sometimes things that look easy aren't. So I don't want to assume that it is.
No, you're answering the right questions. Using it for as a repository, like archival for things that have already been done and you post it. I mean, that's pretty simple. But if the live streaming, if you want to have links created and send them out prior to the actual broadcast, that's more the back end work on that is bit more detailed. If this team needs some consult, Jonathan Whitney, I work with him on a number of projects. He started his own company called Flux Consulting. He's very good, and when you start going down that road, if you need some short-term consult from him to make things run smoothly and understand the back end that needs to happen, I can put you in touch with him.
I'd love to talk to him. I can reach out to him too. That would be good. Yeah, I don't want to make more work, but I've definitely gotten feedback about wanting to make sure we sort of have that easy repository. One of the positives of it too is that if you have a channel, you really just have one link that you send out when something is live streaming. It would sort of prohibit simultaneous meetings live streaming, which might actually be a plus. We've had some feedback about that as well, but so just food for thought. But I think it's an avenue that we should keep on moving down, just to kind of get us close to like a best practices just for transparency and access to our meetings. And I think we can simplify it. I don't think we necessarily need, I've seen, I think the General Assembly, the way we do it is the comments aren't open there. So it doesn't sort of create a place where comments can get lost. It just, and then you make sure the meeting shows people where to direct comments so that they get heard. But I'm happy to have a separate conversation with you about that, Haley, too. If we want to keep looking at it and making sure that we're not making work that we don't have capacity for.
Yeah, that's the only thing I'm nervous about. But yeah, no, it'd be good to get that set up, I think.
Okay, great. Okay, well, I want to be mindful of time. We're after 11:30. So does anyone else have anything else on the public engagement thing before we open it up to any public comment? I think we have one public today. Kyle, if you'd like to say anything, you can feel free now. Anybody else? Okay. Okay,
No.
Thanks, Kyle. All right, everybody good?
Yes.
All right, enjoy this lovely day and have a good weekend. And I'll see you guys next night.
Okay, thank you. Bye.
Okay. Take care, everybody.
Thanks, you too.
Have a good one.